Hey guys, thanks for joining us again. This is part 2 of episode 5 of CCUtech training videos. Today we're going to talk about the other parameters that you'll find on a compressor and how you can use them to your benefit in a live sound setting. So without further ado, here we go. In part 1, we talked a little bit about what a compressor is, what it does, and why it's helpful to you. We also talked about the two main parameters that you'll find on that compressor, which are ratio and threshold. Today I want to go a little bit deeper and talk to you about 3 other parameters that you'll find there, all that are kind of time-based, that help you shape transients and the timbre of certain instruments. So let's start off. The first thing that I want to talk about is attack. Attack, it's pretty simple overall. Sometimes it can be difficult to wrap your mind around though. So attack is basically, say we have a threshold right here and we have peaks coming up above the threshold, like so. If it's a snare drum or something like that. Attack is basically how long it takes for the full amount of gain reduction that is set by that ratio to begin happening on a certain input. So when a peak jumps over a threshold, the maximum ratio doesn't start working in the gain reduction right away. So say I have a 5-to-1 ratio set here. When this peak jumps above, it's not automatically going straight to a 5-to-1 ratio. How long it takes after you've come above that threshold to reach the maximum gain reduction ratio is set by the attack time. And that's usually set in what are called milliseconds. Milliseconds are simply are thousandths of a second. So 500 milliseconds, half a second. 250 milliseconds, quarter of a second, if that makes sense to you. So if I have, say I have a signal that doesn't look like this. Say I have something that comes above and sits for a long time, like an electric guitar or something like that. So I have a 5-to-1 ratio. When it comes above, say I have 0.1 milliseconds here and 0.8 milliseconds here. If I have my ratio, or if I have my attack time set to 0.7 milliseconds, once I jump over, it's not going to start, and I have a 5-to-1 ratio, say, it's not going to start at a 5-to-1 ratio. Right here, it might be a 2-to-1 ratio. And it takes this full 0.7 seconds to reach the 5-to-1 ratio. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. Next up is release time. This is kind of like the other side of attack. So once that initial input has dropped below the threshold, release time is how long it takes your gain reduction to return back to 0. So same kind of thing. We have a threshold here. We have something that peaks and comes above it. Say this is a bass drum. Once it's back below, that release time, also set in milliseconds, defines the amount of time it takes that gain reduction to return back to 0. So if this blue is marking gain reduction, we have this peak, it automatically comes down and squashes that, it drops back below. Say I have a really long release time, it's slowly going to slope back to not reducing the gain at all. Cool. Lastly, the X32 is outfitted with this fun little parameter that you don't see on every compressor, but it's very useful. It's called the hold control. And this hold control is very similar to attack and release. It's another time gain reduction shaping tool. Basically, we ran into a problem with compressors early on. With digital compressors, you're able to get super low attack and release times, which are nice because you can control peaks very easily. But what happens is they get so extremely fast that you actually begin reducing the gain on individual waveforms instead of a whole envelope. And that creates distortion in a compressor that can sound really nasty if you're not careful. So what the hold control does is actually delay the time between the end of gain reduction and when the release begins. So, say we have this threshold again, we have a peak that comes up through. So we have our gain reduction happening initially, but we have another peak coming in right after this, and these are only just a couple milliseconds apart. So normally, this gain reduction, if you have it set super fast, would come back up and then drop again. But because that's happening so quickly, you're actually creating distortion inside of it. So you have gain reduction here, gain reduction here, and it's happening so fast, it sounds bad. So what this hold control does is actually set a delay on this so that it'll catch both peaks and the same gain reduction slope. So this same thing, if I drew it again, it happens like this. Instead of having two separate gain reductions there, we come down here, and this hold time is set to delay this. So it'll actually hold through all the way, and we have this full section of gain reduction there, which keeps us from having any nasty distortion happening. So that pretty much wraps it up for parameters on a compressor. You have threshold, ratio, attack, release, and hold. And I guess I am forgetting one. You do have the makeup gain control. This one can be very dangerous, so you have to be careful with it. Makeup gain, basically, overall, a compressor is reducing gain on something, any type of input. And it's squishing it, and it's making it quieter, actually. So in order to raise that signal back up to a level that is usable, sometimes you'll use post-makeup gain, and that just takes the whole slope with the knee and everything and pushes it up a couple decibels. So sometimes that's usable if you're squashing an instrument super hard, like a bass drum or an electric guitar or a bass guitar or anything like that. So, hope you guys learned a little something today about compressors. If you have any questions, as always, shoot me an email at tanner.daniels@ccuuniversity.edu. Thanks.